Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another video. Today I'm going to be telling you about the 10 books I've read most recently, which also just happened to be the 10 books I've read in 2020 so far. This is my 2020 of reading. I've got a goal of 25 books to get through this year on Goodreads. I'm currently 2 books ahead of schedule, so I'm doing good, I'm doing great. I haven't been reading as much as I would like to in lockdown. I know like everyone's been reading so much in lockdown and I'm like trying to get into it. But obviously I'm still working full time, so I don't have quite as much free time. Like I said in my cross-stitch video, I think, that's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like, I hate seeing everyone else like be able to do nothing all day. I'm really jealous. Like, I wish I had time to read and just like do my hobbies and just chill. But also I'm very grateful I still have a job, so not gonna moan. This is my book pile that we're going to be talking about today. I've got 10 books here. I don't usually go for physical books. I usually actually read on my Kindle a lot nowadays. I know Kindle's controversial. I say this in every book video, but I really love my Kindle. It just saves on space and clutter. I'm like trying to not have as much clutter in my life, just like clear my mind out a little bit. But for some reason this year, recently, I've just got my hands on loads of physical books, which is fine by me. Although the best thing about physical books is you can lend them to your friends, so I'm going to lend all of these to friends that want to read them after this. Right, let's get started. The first book I have for you is this. This is Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepherd. I started reading this in like that weird time between Christmas and New Year. I finished it at the very beginning of this year, I think. At the time I posted this on Instagram and so many people asked me for a review. And I think I posted a small review on Instagram, but I'm so sorry it's taking me so long to actually like talk about it properly. It's really not often I read a non-fiction book and actually be so good that I can't stop reading it, but that's exactly what this book was for me. It's non-fiction, but it reads like fiction. It's basically a memoir written by Dr. Richard Shepherd, who is the UK's top forensic pathologist, and he recounts his career in pathology in a really raw and honest way. He talks about the highs and the lows, and he's very honest about the PTSD he now suffers with, and how his career has affected his personal life over the years. It's essentially his job as a pathologist to study a dead body and work out why somebody died. If somebody's shot, what exactly is it that the bullet hit that caused the death? Did that baby really die from cot death, or was there something more sinister going on? Like things like that. And he's worked on some of the most high profile cases that the UK has seen in recent history. The Hungerford massacre, Princess Diana, the 7/7 bombings. He even travelled to New York in the aftermath of 9/11 to help deal with the British bodies involved in the attack. And he found a really nice balance in this book between writing about the medical clinical side of his career, just talking about the facts, this person died because of like ABC. I really learned so much about death and forensic pathology whilst reading this. But he also has a really nice balance of reminding you that each of these bodies was a person with a life and emotions and thoughts of their own. And he's very honest about how that affects him, like how he can do his job knowing that these people are people. I will warn you, this is not one for the lighthearted. If you struggle with death or medical stuff, anything gruesome or gory, you will struggle with this. He really doesn't skirt around the facts. But if you're like me and are fascinated by pathology and medicine and gore, you'll probably really love this. Next up we have Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness. Another non-fiction, who would have guessed? I never read non-fiction, but apparently now I do. I am a massive Queer Eye fan. I genuinely believe it's like the most uplifting thing on TV right now. Whenever I need to pick me up, the first thing I'll do is turn on an episode of Queer Eye on Netflix, and it will just immediately make me feel a little bit better about the world. Jonathan, I suppose, is the beauty stylist on Queer Eye, and if you're not familiar with JVN and you picked up this book, I imagine you'd be very confused, mainly because it's his autobiography written by him, but also because it's literally written in the way he speaks. Reading it felt like I was having a personal conversation with JVN, and I just adored every single second of it. It was super easy to read. I got through it in just like under 2 days, I think. Jonathan is just such a positive life force on Queer Eye. He's just such a wonderful, uplifting person. And I was really shocked to find out all about his past through this book. Like, for somebody to have dealt with so much pain in their life and still be so full of just self-love and acceptance and loveliness is nothing short of inspiring. I just found this book really inspirational. There's no other word for it really. It just made me want to go out and live a better life. It made me cry, it made me laugh, and by no means is this book a piece of literary genius, but it's just wonderful. And also, I haven't listened to it personally, but the audiobook is narrated by JVN himself, and I hear that's also fantastic. So if you want to listen to the audiobook version, then that's on Audible, I'm sure. One of Us is Next by Karen McManus. Now, full disclosure, I have had a paid sponsorship for the previous 2 Karen McManus books called One of Us is Lying and Two Can Keep a Secret, but I genuinely love the books, and to this day I still get you guys messaging me saying how much you love them too. And in fact, I love them so much, as soon as One of Us is Next, the sequel to One of Us is Lying, came out, I went out and bought it straight away with my own monies. This book is set not too long after the first book finishes. It definitely talks about a lot of the same characters and is very much set in the same world, the same town, the same high school, but the story isn't necessarily linked. I think you could read this without reading the first and not be particularly lost. It's a young adult mystery thriller book about a game called Truth or Dare, or just a game of Truth or Dare, where students of Bayview High are texted dares to complete. If they fail to complete their dare, a secret about them is revealed to the world. It's definitely a page turner. I read this in about a day, I think, and the best thing about Karen McManus books is you know you're always going to be in for a surprise. I feel like there isn't much young adult fiction that does this genre well, and Karen never fails with it in my eyes. Like, everything you'd want in a young adult mystery, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, but it never gets too dark. Like, I'm 25 years old and I bloody love this, and I can only imagine if you're a teenager just getting into like mysteries and thrillers and like psychological books, this would just be the best thing in the world. Scythe and Thunderhead by Neil Schusterman. I have been raving about this series to literally anyone who will listen. My friends are sick of hearing me talk about Scythe, and I haven't even read the last book yet. I think it's next on my list. I love a good dystopian series, but I feel like there hasn't been a good dystopian series in years. The last one I read and really enjoyed was the Divergent series, and since then I've just been on this failed hunt for more. Until now. Yay. Scythe is set in a dystopian world years in the future. We don't know how far in the future because they stopped numbering years and now refer to them by like names of animals. So it's like year of the dog, year of the cat, etc. And it's a world in which everything is controlled by the Thunderhead, which is I suppose a computerized system that just runs the world flawlessly. Everything is worked out by the Thunderhead. It's a world with no hunger, no disease, no war or misery. Everything has been conquered. But in a world with no illness, a cure for literally everything, and the ability to turn back the clock on your age, people still have to die to stop overpopulation, which is where scythes come in. Scythes are chosen to randomly glean people off the earth to keep everything in check. And you can only become a scythe if you don't want to be a scythe. So one day, 2 teenagers called Citra and Rowan are chosen as scythe apprentices. Only the scythedom isn't everything on the inside as it appears to be on the outside. Basically, Scythe introduces you to the characters of Rowan and Citra. It poses loads of really thought-provoking questions about mortality and death, and it basically slowly introduces you to the world. The plot is a little bit slow to begin with, but there's so much to learn about this strange dystopian post-mortality world that you don't really notice the slow plot. It's like a lot of world building. And I'm usually very much a plot-driven reader. If a book doesn't introduce a good plot within the first couple of chapters, I'm usually just out of there. But I think Scythe did it really well. It built this world and sort of slowly introduced this plot. Interestingly, I think Scythe could have been a really good standalone book. It doesn't end on too much of a cliffhanger. Like, this series could have ended with this book and you wouldn't really be left wanting too much more. So I was intrigued to see where they were going to go with the second book. But I'm very glad that it is part of a series. So Thunderhead is, like I said, the second in the series. I didn't find it captured me quite as much as Scythe did. It took a long time for me to really get into the plot of this one. Nothing much really happened until later in the book. But seeing as I was already so invested in the series, I just had to keep on reading. And the ending of this book is insane. Like, oh my god. Not where I expected the story to go at all, in the best possible way. And I'm now desperate to get hold of the last book in the series, which I think is called The Toll. I just want to know how this series ends. I'll highly recommend it. This is like a solid 9 out of 10. This I'd probably give a 7 out of 10. Both really good. Really want to read the last one now. The Taking of Annie Thorne by C.J. Tudor. I read this book about a month and a half ago, I'll say, and I cannot remember really the plot of the story, which I think says all you need to know about this book. When I bought this, I posted it on Instagram and I had loads of people messaging me saying it was an awful book, which I really hate because I'm generally a very positive person and I don't like having a preconceived negative idea of a book before I go into it. So if I post a book on Instagram that you've read and thought was shit, then please just keep your negativity to yourself, because I like to go into things with like a fresh slate. I don't like to have any preconceived notions. But I hate to admit that people were right, this book did suck. I just still don't really understand what happened in this book. I bought it thinking it was a psychological thriller, which I suppose it was, but it ended up being like weirdly focused on the supernatural, and that's just not the kind of thing I enjoy at all. It's basically the story of a man who returns to his hometown, which is this small mining village in England, to solve the mystery of what happened to his younger sister, Annie Thorne, when they were kids, hence the name Annie Thorne. She was missing for a couple of days, and then when she returned, the girl that returned wasn't his sister, but it wasn't. The premise is really interesting. I just thought it went in a really weird direction, and it's not my kind of thing at all. There was never really much of an answer to the mystery as far as I can remember, and it was just a weird book. 2 out of 10. Would not recommend. I hate when people are right about their negativity. The Recovery of Rose Gold by Stephanie Roble. Again, full disclosure, this was part of a paid sponsorship I took part in earlier this year, but I'm not obligated to talk about it again in this video. I'm just being honest about the last 10 books I've read, and this was one of the last 10 books I've read. Also, it is an actual dream come true to have sponsorships where I get to talk about books. Like, that is the dream. If there's any other publishing companies out there that want to work with me, then please hit me up. I wasn't nicknamed Bookworm throughout my entire childhood for no reason. But anyway, this is the story of a girl called Rose Gold who spent her entire life under the clutches of her mother, Patty Watts, who had Munchausen by proxy syndrome and spent years poisoning her daughter, desperate for the attention that having a sick child got her. A lot of you pointed out at the time that this is very similar to the story of Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee Blanchard. I don't think there's any denying the plot was probably inspired by their story, but it certainly doesn't follow it completely. Like, the storyline isn't really that similar. Munchausen by proxy is something that a lot of people suffer under around the world, and it's more like, I'd say more focused on Munchausen than actual, like, following the storyline of Gypsy and Dee Dee, if that makes sense. So the story starts out with Patty Watts in prison for what she put her daughter through, but she gets out of prison and goes to live with her daughter Rose Gold. And it looks like the story is going to be about mother and daughter rebuilding their relationship, but of course it's a lot darker than that. Although this definitely has very dark themes, it's quite a quick and easy read. The twists and turns kept me turning the pages for sure. It's dark, but it's not too dark. And I really thought the ending of this was fantastic. I wouldn't seen the ending coming at all, and I thought it was so good. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, I would say that's pronounced. This is one that I bought at the same time as Annie Thorne, and whilst I had loads of people telling me how shit Annie Thorne was, I had people also telling me how incredible this one was. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. This book is so well written, it really kept me guessing at every single turn. It's about a woman named Alicia Berenson who had this seemingly perfect life until one day she'd shot her husband in the head 5 times, killing him, and then refuses to ever speak another word. When a criminal psychotherapist gets the opportunity to work with Alicia and get her to open up, he jumps at the chance, wanting to unwind the truth. The premise of this book is just incredible. The writing is really gripping. Don't get me wrong, it's by no means the best psychological thriller I've ever read, and in hindsight, I should have seen the ending coming, and it's not entirely believable, but it's so well written that you just don't even notice. I would highly recommend this. It's also quite a short book, so if you're looking for something sort of shorter that you can just like nip through real quick, then would recommend. The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This book was fantastic. Once I really got into it, like give it 50 pages or so, I really couldn't put it down. I read the bulk of it on Sunday, the Sunday just gone, curled up on the beanbag in my living room. The premise of this one, again, is super interesting. Libby Jones turns 25 and finds a letter waiting for her on her doorstep, telling her the story of who she is. She had basically been adopted as a baby and had waited her entire life to find out who she really was, only she gets more than she bargained for, obviously. She finds out that she's the sole inheritor of her family's old abandoned mansion in Chelsea in London. So she goes to the solicitor and finds out the story of her past, of how she was found abandoned in a cot in her house, happy and healthy at 10 months old, whilst the bodies of 3 adults were decomposing downstairs. You find all of that out in literally like the first 2 chapters. It's crazy. So somebody had clearly been caring for this baby, but nobody knew who. There were no belongings or even shoes in the house. The adults were dressed in really weird tunics, and there was a suicide note left on the table. The other children, Libby's siblings, who should have been living at the address, had also disappeared, and nobody had any idea where they were. And nobody had figured it out in 25 years. And then the story is just Libby finding out the story of her past, how she came to be, and the reader finds out what's going on like alongside her. It's a bit confusing at first, as there's 3 different narratives in this book. There's Libby's current timeline, there's Lucy, who's living in France, homeless and struggling to provide for her 2 children, and then there's the story of Henry, Libby's older brother, but him as a child, like in the house in the years before she was born. It's very obvious from the get-go that all three stories are connected, but the way they like gradually intertwine is really well done. It's a very dark, cultish story that really delves into the psychology of why people end up in the situations they do. I found the storyline of Henry's perspective particularly interesting because you just like gradually see his life and his family descend into what it is they became. If you really struggle with multiple narratives, you might find this one a little bit confusing, but I thought it was fantastically done, really well written. The mystery was fantastic. It like really slowly like feeds you information, and I thought it was great. I would really, really recommend this. And last up, we have A Stranger in the House by Shari Lapina. I really didn't want to end this video on a negative note, but seeing as I've done this in chronological order and I only finished this book this morning, I don't really have a choice but to end on this one, I'm afraid. I hated this book. I fought through because I just hate to leave a book unfinished, but Jesus Christ. I vividly remember when I reached page 46 of this book, I thought to myself, I know exactly how this is going to end, and I was kind of right. I really didn't enjoy The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapina either, but I thought I'd give her another chance, and this one was just even worse. It's even worse. I think I remember in my last books video, I spoke about how I'm like really tired, like I'm really over the whole nosy, drunk, agoraphobic woman or neighbour narrative, and this just had that whole thing in spades. It's the story of a woman who's caught speeding through the town before eventually crashing into a pole and giving herself amnesia. She can't remember any of the events of that night, and the story only deepens when a body is found nearby, mysteriously murdered. It sounds like it should be good, but I just found the writing so stilted and boring. The author just switches from perspective to perspective so quickly, nothing is ever explained in any kind of detail. It's just like bam, 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 information with no explaining. I kept waiting for some big twist, something that would shock me, but literally nothing happened. It's a thriller without any kind of thriller. It wasn't until the last 3 pages I read something that actually like shocked me, and by that point it's like, what's the point? This book would have been the same without that very small twist at the end. It just, yeah, sorry, not a fan. Not a fan. And there are the 10 books that I've read so far in 2020. You might be able to tell I'm on like a mission to find the best psychological thriller on this planet. Please let me know your recommendations. I just don't know what it is I'm looking for in a psychological thriller for it to actually like please me, but I just know I haven't found it yet. The best one I've ever read, the closest to perfect, is The Killing Lessons by Saul Black. I think about the book all the time still, it was amazing. And also my favourite book of all time is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Illyri Sainz. People always ask me that as well. But yeah, let me know your book recommendations, particularly psychological thrillers. What's the best psychological thriller you've ever read? I want to know. And any publishing companies out there that want to work with me, just give me a call or email me. My email's downstairs in the description box. That'd be great. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye guys.